My neurologist suggested valproate, and I was like, okay, yeah, fine. I have juvenile myoclonic epilepsy with photosensitivity. So it's, valproate is the kind of go-to for treating the epilepsy that I have. Nobody had warned me about the side effects, I suppose, I was going to get. I had trouble with my eyes. There's been a long-standing issue since I've been on valproate. I had it was like I felt disconnected from the world. My brain, I suppose, wasn't processing information in the way that I was used to before I was on valproate. So that I felt there was this massive disconnect between my brain and my body. And I really struggled with that because I wasn't used to it. So there was no sort of more probing questions about contraception, or no probing questions about, do you have plans to start a family? When do you plan to start a family? This is what you need to do if you're planning to start a family. So when I did become pregnant, it was a bit of a shock. So I didn't plan to get pregnant. It was completely accidental. And I was on valproate when I fell pregnant. So, I'd gone to my GP and said, oh, I'm pregnant. And my GP was quite blasé about it. Okay, great, fab. You need to see your neurologist. But there was no rush to see my neurologist when I fell pregnant. And when I saw my neurologist, he'd kind of explained that, there was a risk with sodium valproate. But if I took 5 milligrams of folic acid during my pregnancy, then my risk would be reduced to the same as taking any other anti-seizure medications. And that risk with any other anti-seizure medication was exactly the same as everybody else in the general population. So essentially what he was telling me is, taking folic acid would be, fine, and my risk was the same as everybody else in the general population. So I was like, okay, this medication can't be this awful then, to be honest. And the only risk that I was told about was cleft lip, cleft palate, and spinal bifida. That was it, nothing else. And I was like, okay, that's like, oh yeah, okay, that's fine, because this folic acid is just going to reduce this risk, so okay, that's all right. So I didn't feel concerned about anything. I didn't feel worried. I didn't feel like there would be any problems afterwards, because nothing had been communicated with me that there would be any problems afterwards. It was really obvious from the moment he was born that something wasn't right. He was born floppy, he was jittery, he was lethargic, he was irritable, he couldn't suckle, and there were so many things. When they took him to the neonatal unit, they treated him for sepsis, but none of his tests came back that he had sepsis. So he spent 2 weeks on antibiotics actually he didn't need. But at the time, I wasn't aware that valproate could cause withdrawals. But I didn't know. Why did no one tell me? And, we can go to the GP now and all we get is, but you took sodium valproate, what do you expect? And I'm like, he's 17 now and he can be sat in the GP surgery with me while I'm trying to fight. And they'll just look at me and go, but you took sodium valproate, what do you expect? And I'm like, I did, yes, absolutely, I took sodium valproate, but, can we put that aside for a moment and focus on the fact that I'm sat here with my son who's in pain, who needs some help, who needs to be referred to a specialist, and take that out of the equation just for one moment? Because if he was a child whose parent hadn't taken sodium valproate, would you be dismissing them like this? The answer is no, you wouldn't be dismissing them like this. So, please don't dismiss me and my child because I took a medication that I was told was safe, or not safe, but I was told wasn't going to harm him in these ways. So why am I having to fight for help for him? Why is no one else in my corner? Why is it just me in this corner? Why is everybody just saying to me, yeah, but it's your fault because you took sodium valproate? I sit and think about his future, and I'm like, I'm not going to be here forever. What is his future going to look like? I don't think I can probably put really into words, the impact that it's had on our family. Life is just this whirlwind, I suppose. It's really crap sometimes. It's really hard, and I really hate having to fight constantly to get him what he needs. I really do. But on the other hand, I'm like, wow, I love seeing life through his eyes. But that medication has caused him so much harm. And I don't know what the future holds for him. And that's a really scary thought as a parent. I think for me, the redress would just mean knowing Zach would be stable in the future. I don't know if he's ever going to be able to work. I don't know if he's ever going to be able to live independently. I don't know if he's ever going to be able to do any of the things that his friends do right now. So knowing that he's got something there for when, I'm not around, or for when I'm older, when I can't care for him, is really important to me. I find it mind-blowing, utterly mind-blowing that nobody has been held accountable, I suppose, and that 5 years on, we're still having these conversations about when is this going to happen? When is someone going to take accountability for this? In whatever way, shape, or form it manifests, when is there going to be accountability for it? Because there hasn't been any accountability.